Welcome to the Bean Pod, a podcast about decentralized finance and the Beanstalk protocol. I'm your host, Rex. Before we get started, we always want to remind everyone that on this podcast, we are very optimistic about decentralized finance in general and Beanstalk in particular. With that being said, 3 things. First, always do your own research before you invest in anything, especially what we talk about here on the show. Second, while you're doing that research, try to find as many well-developed, opposing viewpoints as possible to get the best overall picture. And third, never ever invest money that you can't afford to lose or at least be without for a while. Oh, and as a quick reminder, Publius uses a voice modulator to help conceal their identity. It's certainly nothing to be afraid of, but it does take a little bit of getting used to. And with that, on with the show. So you talk about Hamilton and the Federalist Papers as being kind of foundational to the American system of government. Couldn't agree more. Along with that, how about you take us through some of your initial thoughts and philosophies as you began to work through the value of the project and going from whatever the idea was that started you down this journey to getting a product ready for initial launch with something that could be turned around and shown to other people and start to build the team and the community around that.
Yeah, there's a lot there as to like how in God's name did we get here. So there's a couple different things, mostly right place, right time for a lot that things came together in the way that they did. But to give a little bit of context as to what some of those things were, we've all been in crypto and exposed to crypto for a various amount of time, but 5-6 years, and all really had the bias that technology built on cryptographic primitives and decentralized networks in particular are going to be a major part of the advancement of many of the ideas of the American Constitution, which today are certainly in jeopardy, to say the least. And when we think about the role of this technology, it's still very young, and there's a lot of problems with that technology. And so the starting point is we want to be a part of advancing the adoption of this technology, which we view as incredibly promising towards achieving some of the really important changes that need to happen in the not too distant future to keep things moving in the right direction, and certain things that ensure individual freedoms and individual liberties are, in our opinion, really important to furthering individual freedoms. And this technology very clearly offers a lot of solutions, but that doesn't really get to why a stablecoin or why Beanstalk and why did we actually do this. So one of the things that most attracted us when we first got into crypto was the idea of decentralized betting markets for the degen in all of us. And ultimately, stuff like decentralized prediction markets are really potentially revolutionary. Stuff like Augur, which is a decentralized prediction market built on Ethereum that they did an ICO for in 2015, and then it launched in July of 2018. But Augur never really reached any sort of significant adoption. And that was something we spent a lot of time thinking about why. And sure, you have Ethereum fees and friction there, which makes order books difficult, and there's lots of other complexity that you have to get right, which Ethereum makes potentially difficult. But ultimately, Augur is live. You can use it. And so that didn't really make sense to us as why it never got adopted. And the thing that we kind of settled on or came to the conclusion of was that the current structure of the markets, the currencies you had available to use on Augur made Augur really impractical to use, because you could either use Ethereum, for example, which is super decentralized and native to the Ethereum network, or you could use Ether, excuse me. But the problem was that the value of Ethereum was incredibly volatile. And so you're making a bet on one thing, but in reality, you're also taking a bet on the price of Ethereum. And then you could hedge your risk, but then that's a pain in the ass. And who wants to do that? And so in reality, using Augur in a practical way to get exposure to the things that you wanted to bet on was easier said than done. So in short, Augur also supports stablecoins, coins that are pegged to the value of a US dollar, for example. And so you would say, well, why don't people just use stablecoins? And the conclusion that we came to was that because of the really high borrowing costs on stablecoins, it made making markets on Augur really impractical. If you have to borrow at 10% or 12% a year, or even if you own the asset, now you have to judge whatever you're using your money for against the opportunity cost of lending it out for 10 or 12% a year. That really changes what is a positive expected value decision to make, or at least the expected value on certain actions with that money have to be much higher. And that makes using Augur really impractical. High borrowing costs make using Augur really impractical. And so then the question becomes, well, why are there high borrowing costs? Well, in theory, at least, if you have an excess amount of demand for something, there's excess demand that typically results in its price going up. And because you have these various different stable coins that all have pretty good peg maintenance models, they're all, because of their collateralization, all relatively good at maintaining a stable price at their peg value. The excess demand for these stable coins doesn't manifest itself in a high price for the stablecoin. It manifests itself in high borrowing costs. So the conclusion that we came to was that there was this huge shortage of stablecoins, which the market was unable to meet. It was unable to supply enough stablecoins to meet demand. And that resulted in high borrowing costs, which made using not just Augur, but lots of different cool tech across DeFi really impractical. And that's why, in reality, the only stuff that you really see happening across DeFi right now is lending and yield farming, because nothing else is cost effective compared to that. And so, why is it that you have a supply shortage? In short, it's really hard to, if you have a collateral requirement to create a stable coin, if you say for every stable coin we're going to issue, we're going to hold $1 in a bank account or $1 of Ethereum in a smart contract, it's really hard to attract enough collateral to mint 100 billion or $1 trillion worth of stable coins. And if you're going to lock up 100 billion or $1 trillion of value in a bank account or in a CDP doing nothing, well, there's opportunity cost associated with locking up all that capital. And accordingly, any collateralized model is going to have some sort of high borrowing costs associated with the requirement to lock up collateral. So that's still just our thoughts. That doesn't explain why we actually got started working on this. So if you go back to around September, it's not September, Thanksgiving of 2020, ESD was blowing up at the time. And we, Publius, just happened to all be hanging out around Thanksgiving. We know each other from college and just happened to be in the same place around Thanksgiving, and we're catching up. And basically, we're talking about ESD and its recent success and how that was really aligned with our prior convictions that there was this structural problem with the stablecoin market. And the fact that ESD was blowing up said to us that maybe our conviction was right, because ESD was an attempt at a non-collateralized stablecoin. And so, in short, we decided to read the ESD white paper together that evening, and it was very cool and inspirational, and there was a lot of great content there. But at the same time, there were some really obvious inefficiencies and problems in their model. And despite the obvious, or what were obvious to us, issues with the model, the market was really eating up ESD, and there was a ton of speculative demand for ESD. And so, in short, we decided that evening that we could make a fork of ESD in what we thought would be a couple of months, 2, 3 months at most, and make some improvements, fix the issues that we saw with it, and roll out a competitor, a fork. Very quickly, within a couple weeks, actually, we kind of realized that as we were thinking more and more about the model, it was going to require a ground up rethinking of a lot of different aspects of the model. And that would require an entirely new code base and a new white paper to explain it. And accordingly, it went from a 2, 3 month side project to what became like an all intensive 9 month sort of sprint until we ended up publishing or deploying on the Ethereum mainnet the first week of August of 2021. So that's the long and the short of it. And we would just say that to go back to where we started this on why we decided to be anonymous and use a pseudonym, despite the fact that we put our real heart and soul into the project, and you would think you'd want to put your name on that and show it proudly that that's what we worked on that. And certainly there's that aspect to it. But because we put our heart and soul into it, we want to give Beanstalk the absolute best chance humanly possible to succeed at its goal to become a global, decentralized, autonomous issuer of money. And we felt that the benefits of putting our name on it, both to ourselves individually and potentially the ability to more quickly attract people to Beanstalk in the short term, was going to jeopardize or at the margin affect in a negative way Beanstalk's chances at succeeding at that goal in the long run. So that's how we got here.
That's great. So there are a couple things that I was thinking about as you were talking. The first is the utility of stablecoins versus, let's say, value-driven cryptocurrency like Bitcoin or Ethereum, where there's significant fluctuation in value. And I feel like this is almost a chicken and egg problem for decentralized finance in general. And you seem to kind of hint at it, that we've got all this really interesting potential for things that can be done on decentralized networks, new types of transactions that can happen. But because of the variability in value of, let's say, Ethereum, it makes it difficult to use that particular coin as a mode of transaction or as a currency of transaction. So that seems to be what turned you towards stablecoins. But then you put in this idea of neutral carry versus negative carry, and we could talk about that more, either here or at some other venue. Basically, the idea that the utility of a coin is somewhat opposed to its value as a lending tool, which unfortunately takes away its utility. It makes it a more difficult or a less enticing medium of transaction, or less enticing currency to use to actually do stuff. And so it seems like the problem that Beanstalk is looking to solve is to create a currency that is indeed stable, that can be used for transactions where someone utilizing it doesn't have to worry about the price of Ethereum right now as opposed to the price of Ethereum in 10 minutes or the price of Ethereum in 2 years. So creating stability from that standpoint. And then at the same time, to have that ability to be used for practical purposes without the user feeling like they're missing out on making some type of 5, 6, 7, 10% return on an investment. So eventually, when we get to the point where we use cryptocurrency to buy soccer balls or pay for haircuts, there is both stability and utility for the coins that are available through systems like Beanstalk.
Yeah, you said it quite well. And the core design principles of Beanstalk are both a response to the current structure and a statement as to what things could be when incentives are properly aligned. And so, maybe we'll get into some parts of the specific mechanism to get to that, and how they create those effects. But ultimately, that's the name of the game, right? When you have well defined incentive structures within a protocol, you can create some sort of new utility in the same way that Ethereum miners or Bitcoin miners are spending money and spending resources to create some sort of utility. That can be applied more generally to various different protocols, and Beanstalk is trying to be one of them.